Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast of Peculiar Ventures. This week, we're going to be discussing the topic of weapon design. I'm here, as usual, with my co-host, Ali.
Hello.
My name is Shane, and our guest this week is Gabe.
Hi, I am Gabe. I am a primarily a graphic designer and person who plays a lot of video games.
As do we all.
I love video games.
The video.
My dad was a video game actually. I'm half video game.
I'm the half video game on your father's side.
Yeah, half video game on my father's side. He was a copy of Super Contra.
Are you deeply fond of your heritage?
Yeah. Every day I go and armchair dev on Reddit, telling people that they don't know how video games work. Telling people who get paid $80,000 a year and have gone to university, telling them that they don't know how to make video games. Yeah,
it sounds like the perfect living situation, I think.
Yeah.
So
what's my passion?
What's the first topic you'd like to get on then?
Because we're talking about weapon design and like I think feel is usually the first one I come to, and in most games, because I primarily play shooters, I think I kind of have a weird standard. I think I kind of started forming it in my head because I heard somebody talk about. Have you ever heard of start to crate? Which is like the point in which you start a game and then the first time you see a crate. It's not super important. It's just be like, oh, this is the very first thing that has appeared in multiple other games. And then somebody mentioned it when they're talking about Doom, which was start to shotgun, which is how fast in a first person shooter do you get a shotgun? Which for some reason then made me think about caused me to evaluate how I perceive gunplay in first person shooters. And I now have a weird basis, a standardized, I guess, test, which is if there's a shotgun, I try and get it as fast as I possibly can in a video game. And I sort of start there, which is to say, what components of a shotgun make it feel the best? Which I can kind of spiral out into other stuff if you have anything to add before I get into it.
Well, interestingly enough, my perception on shotguns has always been this thing where, I used to play a lot of Halo, and I love shotguns in video games. They're probably one of my favorite weapons inside of shooters. I'm a big fan of Gears of War as well, where the shotgun's the most necessary weapon in the whole game. But the issue I have with a lot of shotguns, especially games that have shotguns, is I don't like when a shotgun is a sawed-off all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when the design perspective, because Halo had this, the design perspective is that you really can't shoot somebody from a distance with a shotgun and have it be effective in any way.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost exclusively a point-blank, blow somebody up in one shot kind of weapon.
Mm-hmm.
And I like seeing shotguns have a further range and be more relevant in a mid-range because, shotguns as a weapon, they're not, they're used for hunting. You don't walk up to an animal point-blank and shoot it with a shotgun. You use it at a range. So, that's it.
Which I think usually, though, it's a balance thing, because I am reminded of somebody saying if shotguns worked in video games the way they do in real life, there would be no reason to use any other weapon type.
Yeah, I understand that. I get that.
I think I do understand,
I like the happy median.
Yeah, if a shotgun is useless beyond 3 feet, basically.
Yeah, I don't like it when it's that.
I think that's where some games have slug shotguns, and I think that's where it comes into play. But yeah, my basis is of a shotgun is sort of where I guess my gold standard weapon, because I think it is my favorite type of gun in a first person shooter. I have a different type of favorite in third person shooters, and I think I have a different standard that I can elaborate on later. But so to me, the things that make the shotgun seem right are the major components of its design. It's audio design. I think it's fire rate, its recoil, and how it looks. I think primarily if a shotgun doesn't sound like you're hitting something with a truck, if it sounds repeatedly, and there's no sort of if it's not bassy enough, it starts to immediately be this. I start to get kind of wary of how the other guns are going to feel, because sound to me, especially because I play with nice headphones, that the sound of a shotgun firing, it should be bassy, unless you like put a suppressor on it in some games. But it should be bassy and it should be loud, and it should be sort of like the first thing that comes to mind is that like this is something that is going to just eliminate whatever is in front of you.
Yeah,
like
it's got the power behind it.
Yeah. Same thing with I think I realize that I don't like fast firing shotguns in games because there's something about them a shotgun not feeling powerful is like counterintuitive to what I want, and it feels bad, which I can elaborate on specifically why they feel bad, which is they don't feel like they are in my mind what the archetype of a shotgun is, which is incredibly high damage, really, really powerful, and really, really loud. But like something like an AA-12 in a lot of games is not that.
So essentially, the shotgun for you is the weapon that you fear to have somebody holding when you turn a corner.
Yeah, and like I think because of that, it's not that crazy that somebody wants to feel like in a first-person shooter, especially because I play something like a lot of Destiny, is that I want to feel powerful when I have a weapon like that, and I use the shotgun as a litmus test because if the shotgun is bad, I feel like I'm going to hate every other type of weapon.
Okay, yeah, so you use it as like the design perspective that you assume the rest of the game is using.
Yeah, like how much thought they went into all of them. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. Yeah, it's I absolutely love shotguns, and there's certain things like if you go to Apex Legends, which is interesting because that's one of those games where the loot you get determines the fire rate of your shotgun and the recoil of your guns. So the way that the weapons are tuned is based on how like equipped you are. But they have the two primary shotguns in that game, which are the Peacekeeper and the Ava Auto. And I hate the Ava Auto. It feels bad for me to use because I feel like unless I hit people directly point blank with it, it's not going to do anything. And in a scenario where it's going to do anything, the Peacekeeper would have just killed them already.
Yep.
So I understand what you're saying with the you don't have that stopping power behind the shotgun, and it feels kind of bad. Now,
like under all circumstances, I'd rather just have the thing immediately have the stopping power.
Yeah.
But yeah, you were saying something else. So
so that's interesting to me. And then there's like weird stuff like shotgun attachments or something where a gun has like a special attachment put on it because some shooting games have like equipment and attachments where you'll feel that power, but it's like changing the gun you're using. So you play a lot of Destiny, and that's a game where a lot of things have a ton of health.
Yes.
And so how do you measure a shotgun and like the damage that it deals, I guess? How do you feel the weight of that gun and like the strength of that gun when you're just hitting a bullet sponge with it?
So in a lot of RPGs, I think I can also touch on a little bit of Borderlands here too. In a lot of RPG shooters, one of the things that the shotgun is that there are enemies in Destiny. You have your sort of rank and file red bar enemies that drop in like really any number of hits. Usually one or two to the head, maybe a couple more if you're using like an auto rifle or something like that. But there are the orange bar enemies, which are considered to be majors. And so to me, what I expect when I pull the trigger is to effectively kill or almost kill them. Basically down to the point where all I need to do is slap them and they're gone. Similar to in Halo, when you'd be playing the game on like Legendary or so, when you'd come up to one of those really, really badass elites, like the Ultras, and they would come right into your face, and you would barrel stuff them with a shotgun, and they would have that tiny sliver of health that you just hit them with the butt. That is sort of in my mind what is the idea of what that shotgun should be. It should get them either just blown off the face of the earth, or it should get them to the point where, like, if you breathe on them too hard, they're dead.
Yeah. I remember back when I used to play Halo 3 a lot online. That was how you function with the Mauler, because it wouldn't one-shot anybody at any range, but at point-blank range, it would blow their shields off, so you would just maul, melee, and kill them. And even you would just do that with the normal shotgun, too, if you're really close to somebody, in case they weren't, like, close enough to get one-shotted. That's kind of a like habit I've brought into like stuff like Overwatch, where if you're playing Roadhog, when you hook somebody, you hook shotgun melee them every time. You can tell if somebody plays Roadhog like a decent amount if they always melee after they shoot their gun, as opposed to like people who will hook you, shoot, and then go, oh fuck, they're not dead.
Yeah.
So
and I think because of that, because I've played a lot of Halo, is that I have an expectation of how a shotgun should operate. And so there's things like Borderlands, which is the opposite, where the problem I have with the shotguns is that I expect them, especially because in Borderlands a lot of them use multiple shots when you fire them.
Mhm.
I have this, that I think a lot of weapons are built around expectations. And I think that comes from where you, like, what things you've seen or what you've played with those weapons. But, like, just continuing with shotguns, is that I have an expectation that a shotgun should be basically like a close range problem solver, and if anything comes within that range, that they're gone.
yeah,
But in Borderlands, I think that's why I dislike the shotgun so much, is that they weren't that, and that was what I expected and wanted. And because I had that notion of that, whenever I would have to use them, they just were wrong, I guess, and that definitely soured my like sort of opinion of that game a lot.
yeah. One interesting thing to me is when a game takes into account something like if you have a shotgun, and it doesn't have to necessarily be first-person shooters. You have a mechanic so you can get close to people with the weapon you have.
Mhm.
So like they have mechanics built in for because they know your weapon has a shorter range to
Yep.
be able to get up close to things. Hook mechanics are big for that, and that
Yep.
was an interesting thing when Overwatch brought it in with Roadhog, and they had the hook mechanic that they brought in to get close to the shotguns.
Yeah, like it was like the 1-2 combo on weak enemies. It was like a pick almost.
Yeah, and so I like to see that stuff, and even stuff I've talked before about how there was a unit that was going to be in StarCraft 2, but they removed it, which was like it would grapple to something, and then it would start shooting it with a shotgun. So it wanted to be up close, and it had like a grappling hook to get there into the threat range. So I like shotguns a lot in a lot of games, and like that being threatening. I mean, even stuff like fighting games will have characters that'll use like a shotgun for one of their attacks, and generally it has pretty short range. It's not going to be like super lengthy like most guns would be inside of games. So
and I think if I were to talk about like a melee weapon, I think the closest thing I could think of is like a hammer in another game. Is that to me I think it's a personal preference that I really like slow firing, high impact weapons, and that's where I sort of go with what feels really good. And I think that there's I think it's a little easier to get across with melee weapons, so like swords and like even I think bows to an extent, which aren't necessarily melee, but I think they come across well in that way. Where I think there's a much more visual impact, because when you fire a shotgun or something in a first-person shooter, and in a third-person shooter, it's even I think a little harder to see. But like the recoil of the actual gun and the way that they rear back when they actually fire a shot is sort of hard to determine. But the closest thing I think of is a hammer, where it's really slow, does a lot of damage on hit, and it has a nice wind-up, has a long period of time in between hits.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking in my mind something like Dark Souls, something like Monster Hunter.
Yeah.
Almost for some reason forgot the name of it.
Well, a lot of RPGs will have it where you have like two-handed melee weapons that will be slower, higher damage, more armor piercing, but they're not going to be swinging them very quickly. Mm-hmm. And then you move to the polar opposite of that, which is like the rapier style like sword.
Yep.
Where it's the swift sword that you get a lot of swings in, but it's very low damage. Maybe you're focusing on parrying more so than you're focusing on like getting those specific punishing hits.
Well, even the other thing is, like you said, the hammer is often two-handed, so you often sacrifice any sort of defensive capability with a hammer. Because think of the Monster Hunter example, the hammer's a pretty defenseless weapon outside of just pure evasion, whereas something like a sword or shield or a charge blade, like you have the shield for defensive options. Lance too, gun lance as well. It's a lot more all-in kind of weapon, I feel, and that's kind of what the trade-off is. It's kind of glass cannon-y because you commit so much to your offense.
I think that like in that situation, I think it's almost weird to describe things like a shotgun or a hammer as being methodical. But to me, that is part of their feel, is that the intended goal of sort of going in and sort of timing and pacing yourself and a little bit of setup in it because you can't just kind of go out swinging, especially in Monster Hunter. You can't just absolutely go in without a plan of what you're going to do with a hammer. You have to have the expectation of what's going to do and what the expectation, and it has an expectation of you of how to use this thing without completely getting blown up. Same with the shotgun. You can't just use it because if you're too far away, it's nothing. It's pointless.
Okay.
But you have to kind of get the setup, get into the range.
I mean,
as much as I keep elaborating on these, I do think it's important that what makes all the things feel, all these weapon types unique, and you were mentioning it comparatively to something like a rapier, is sort of the greater context that all of the weapons fall into. Because I also don't want to just keep talking about shotguns and hammers, because I want to like discuss sort of how comparative design is important and what other things exist. You know, like they form the identities of everything. Yeah, a shotgun in a vacuum is nothing, but if you put a shotgun, an SMG, a knife, and I don't know, a rocket launcher all in the same space, then they all start beginning to fall into their own different roles.
Yeah, like moving forward, that's a big thing about short range stuff. Like I love CQC in a lot of games, but the punishment of it is that you're less effective from mid to long range. That's like a big balancing thing. You can kill people like immediately if they get up close to you, but if they're not up close to you, then you're gonna struggle and you want to get there. And not every single game implements tools to get you there easily. You have to kind of just position yourself to be close a lot of the time.
I think that's where what I was mentioning with comparative design is that like the feel and feel expectation and sort of I'm not going to say proper balancing, but sort of proper understanding of how to make weapons feel niches is so I think incredibly important and sort of is fundamental to making sure that weapons feel good in games.
Yeah, because you not only do you have like a PvP environment where like you want something that can fill a niche within every single range in every department, but you also have games and campaigns and stuff where Ollie and I have talked about this before, something like a Metroidvania, where you have your different weapons for different situations and they allow you to do additional things. So the design of the weapon can often be not only something like, I guess a Zelda game would be an example. It's not only something that you can use for combat, but it's also something you use to achieve getting through puzzles and stuff. So it has like a multifaceted design.
The sort of thing I'm thinking of is in particular is in my mind I always pair something like twin daggers against a hammer against a sword and board because they in my mind represent I guess what I would describe as three archetypes of weapons. You have your fast, low damage. You have your sort of middle of the road with the sword and shield. You're more flexible, but not flashy, not fast. And then you have your I'm going to go for huge numbers, and I have to go slow with it. This is slow, but every hit is going to hit a lot. That sort of thing. Yeah,
you have your pretty much your heavy. I'm very punished for missing this. But if I hit it, I'm very, very heavily rewarded. Then you have something that's faster is going to be less punishing because you have more time to recuperate after failing with it. You have more opportunity, and then something that's like hyper defensive is really going to be mostly leaning on you to counter your opponent and what they're doing, and less so on just getting in really good hits.
And like it sometimes gets tricky to making weapons feel like they have, or weapon types have individual identities because of the fact that they're in these. Sometimes multiple weapons fill similar niches.
Yeah.
And there's a difficulty there in establishing what the feel is and what each of these things has to do. Like in Halo, take the assault rifle versus the shotgun versus the SMG. They all kind of operate in similar ranges. They all kind of do a similar thing, especially the SMG and the auto rifle, or not auto rifle, the assault rifle. And it's like, what makes these things all feel unique and in their own way have some sort of purpose for existing? Which I guess that intentionality is massive when you're designing anything. I mean, that kind of goes without saying, especially if you get into games that have much larger like weapon pools. The way that all of those things feel is important. Like something like Call of Duty, some of the later Dark Souls games have a shit ton of weapons in them, and then I think I could point to some examples where I feel like that's failed. I don't know if you guys have any examples off the top of your head.
I mean, an example would be like something like even Apex Legends, where you don't, you look at Halo, and Halo has the assault rifle, and maybe you have something like, the Covenant have their equivalent to it, but at most, every archetype's going to be filled out by like 2 guns. Yep. Halo has a specific gun for everything. It doesn't have like too many multiples of it. But you move over to like Call of Duty, you move over to something like Apex Legends, and there are tons of assault rifles and tons of SMGs, and they all have like different firing rates, different recoil, different like stopping power, and like they all fulfill similar roles in a certain aspect, but it comes down to not only personal preference, but also like, if people are trying to be competitive about it, they'll figure out which one is the most efficient and the best one, and balancing that can be very difficult. And I was thinking about it along the terms of something like For Honor, where that's a game where the weapons are specific to the character. You don't pick up weapons or anything, but all those characters are created with the weapon up. So you have the weapon, and then they created a character around them. So they decided, we want a character who uses a sword and a shield. Okay, what are we going to do with him? And so they have to give identity to those weapons and how they function, and then they have to give identity to a character that has the weapon. So that's very interesting, because you have something like, you have multiple characters in that game who have a shield and a weapon. You have the character who has there's 2 characters with swords and weapons. There's a Viking and a knight. But they're sword and board. But there's a Viking and a knight, and they have distinctive differences between them. They're both defensive characters because they have a shield, but they have like distinctively unique ways that they go about doing things to try and give them identity, despite their role being very, very similar. And that is kind of what you have to do with a lot of weapons, where you have to try and like have a unique identity to them, as opposed to them just exclusively filling out a role, because then you're just going to have to repeat the same thing repeatedly. I
think one of the things that it's you know me well enough that it's not a secret that I'm not a big fan of Overwatch, but I think that one of the things that I have found that I disliked is that I never felt like a lot of the weapons of the similar type ever felt like they were diversifying themselves. Something like what is it? I like a lot of the shotguns never felt like they were really particularly like differentiating themselves from each other. Maybe it was the intent, but I always wanted them to feel like they should have been doing something different, like drastically different from each other. Because I know Roadhog's had an alt fire.
Yeah, Roadhog is distinctly unique from Reaper, at least when it comes to, because Roadhog's shotgun is more likely to kill somebody at point blank range than Reaper's is, but Reaper's is a faster fire rate. You have more shots before you have to reload, and he doesn't have the alternate fire. So that felt distinctly unique. I mean, I'm trying to think of another character with a shotgun in that game other than those 2.
Wait, did I say they were not different from each other, or did I say they were?
You said they weren't different from each
other?
Because
I think I was thinking of Borderlands, because that was a frequent problem I would run into. That it was like, I don't know why I don't like. In that I don't know, they made a lot of weird choices with the way that they made weapon types, especially like shotguns, and they had a bunch of different brands, but it definitely felt like in Borderlands 1, and to a lesser extent 2, that a lot of the weapons across different brands didn't feel as unique as I expected them to, despite them saying that, these things are unique. Well, but they're not. Overwatch was different. I don't know what I was thinking of. I'm sort of like all over the place because I've been out and about since like 6 a.m.
Yeah, I get you. For me, it's really just that like Borderlands hinges on its idea of having like, you're never gonna find the same gun twice, but the differences between guns aren't necessarily so impactful because they don't design guns. They design components and they smash they smash them together and a gun comes out.
Yeah, they're like ranges, because like 2 guns could be different, but that's just because one's a worse version of another one, because it's just the same gun but with worse numbers, or one's the same gun but better numbers, because they work with like these ranges and probabilities when like making the weapons, which is a fine design point for what they're going for, but it kind of adds into the what you're expecting and what you're receiving of like when you are in a vacuum hearing the phrase like, oh, 1 billion different guns, you in your mind you think like, oh, like each one plays radically differently, but the reality is they're just converge on the same ideas with just different numbers and different efficiencies.
Yeah. It reminds me of Enter the Gungeon.
Yeah.
Which, like, that game more so is like, alright, we're going to have distinctive guns, but we're also just going to be crazy with it, because you have, like, the gun that just shoots guns, and then you have the money gun, where you just shoot money out of your gun.
Yeah, I think Enter the Gungeon, although that's almost unfair given the nature of that, where everything in that, and I think it's a common thing in roguelikes, is that, like, that and the Binding of Isaac have a lot of very similar weapons, and well, not weapons, like upgrades and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they always manage to feel unique, because they do very slight things, even within their sort of greater type. I remember there's a lot of ones, I think there was, like, in the Binding of Isaac, they call them, like, Technology 0.5 up to, like, 2.5, I think they are.
Yeah.
But they all do very similar things. They're, like, laser-related or, like, controlling your tears related. But they all are unique in ways that are sometimes frustrating, which, given the nature of that kind of game, that just comes with the territory. Or they're unique in a way that they allow you to do something just different than normal. So, like, I think and especially when they start working in conjunction with other abilities that you have, like being able to control, like, a Ring of Tears with one of the pieces, which Enter the Gungeon and the Binding of Isaac have the added benefit of sort of the not multiplicity. Oh, I guess so. But you effectively have any weapon, and then it starts crossing over with other weapons, and you just sort of get out of control really fast like that, because they start, I guess, crossbreeding to create new horrible devices.
Yeah, well, and there's another way that you can variate weapons that doesn't necessarily affect the gameplay quite as much, but, like, the player themselves will feel uniquely different using it. I noticed that with, like, the Outer Worlds.
Yes. In
the Outer Worlds, there's so many different melee weapons in that game. And all of them kind of just boil down to you take a blunt weapon and smack somebody with it. Like, there's not really that much unique about the weapons from each other, other than the occasional, like, this stuns enemies, this does acid damage to enemies, this causes them to stagger, that kind of stuff. But
this one has an orb at the end of it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that, like, the visual difference between the weapons makes you, like, interested in using it regardless of whether or not it really functions that differently from the other ones. And you can, like, add this factor of feeling really cool when using a melee weapon. Now, in my current playthrough, I've completely abandoned melee weapons, because I was just like, I'm gonna be a smooth talking boy with a bullet in my teeth. I'm gonna just shoot people if I need to, but most of the time I'm gonna tell them, hey, I'll give you a kiss if you do this, and they're like, oh man, I want that kiss. Give me that kiss.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Give me your bushy mustache in my face.
Oh, does your character have a mustache?
Yeah, my character has a handlebar mustache. Although most of the time you can't see it because I'm usually wearing a helmet. But
okay, yeah.
So, and the guns in that game feel like the shooting weapons feel decently unique, but in the end, I just take whichever one has the highest damage number on it, because that's just kind of what I'm doing. I'm not doing it for aesthetic there, but in my second playthrough, I'll probably go for, like, a melee build, and I'll go for, like, an Unga Bunga character who goes up to people, and it's just like, you know, oh, I'll make a deal with you. No, I kill you. No, me kill. So I'm interested to see that. But I know you really like visual designs for weapons.
Yeah, that's probably the thing I have the actual most amount to talk about, probably, and probably the most cohesive thoughts. Everything else, because this is very off the cuff. I've been talking myself into circles, which very sorry to anyone listening there. I've been trying to put my thoughts in order, because it's other stuff that is related to how a gun looks and feels to me. Yeah. But knowing how a gun looks is probably, or not even a gun. I just have a bunch of screenshots of Destiny open, and I'm looking at them right now. I'm literally looking at my collection in Destiny to sort of get my thoughts together, because it's easier to look at all of them and be like, okay, right. I understand that.
Well, before we get into visual design with guns, I did want to give Ali a chance to talk about, like, anything, any factors of weapons design that you particularly like, or anything that you've been thinking about.
Well, actually, segues good into this, because for me, a lot of it, like, of course there is the mechanical aspect of, like, how a weapon feels to play, but really when I start a game, I don't go in knowing what I necessarily want to play. I just go for what looks really good, and I decide I'm going to play that no matter what it is. Like, when I first got into Monster Hunter, I would look at every single one of the weapons and their weapon designs, and from there I would decide like, okay, this weapon has the coolest designs, like as at least to me, so this is going to be my main weapon. And that's pretty much how I like proceeded through the game and knew what I wanted to build first, and then from there it sort of led into, these are mechanical things I've noticed I enjoy a lot, so this is how I'm going to build my character.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying from that like perspective, because there are times, I think it was like when Skyrim came out and I was gonna play it and they're like, you can dual wield. I'm like, all right, well I'm just gonna play a dual wield character because like it's the new feature, I wanted to do it. Regardless of whether or not that was like effective or even felt good, it was like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have this character who's gonna dual wield, and then God, what was it like? When all my friends were playing Modern Warfare 2, and but when Modern Warfare 2 came out, we kept doing like split screen sessions at people's houses, did a bunch of like couch gameplay, and as soon as I learned like, oh, you can have throwing knives, and I was like, that's all I'm ever doing, and all I did was I would just run around being like, here comes Knifey Jones, just throw knives at people and knife people in the back and jump out windows, and they're just like, what are you doing? It's just like I'm playing the game my way.
That's why a lot of people actually start playing Hunter in Destiny, because not sharpshooter. Why can I? Oh, Gunslinger. Gunslinger has a throwing knife, and people are like, "That's cool as fuck." And they were just like, "I just want to dome people with a knife, and that's all I want to do."
That's my entire gameplay.
Yeah, is doming people with knives and rolling around with a revolver. Which the visual design, I think I can sort of go from there, is that like, because I was thinking about this specifically, is that things like revolvers have a really specific look in my brain, and that's where I guess it ties into expectation, is like what it's going to do, and sort of the look and how that makes me feel, the way it looks when it fires. For example, in Destiny, there is a hand cannon called the Last Word. I will actually post a picture for you to see if that's possible at all. But it is this sort of very, like, stereotypical, like, cowboy revolver. Like, it's this gunmetal and gold. It has a wood grip. It has filigree on it. Yeah. And so looking at it, it's like, okay, the way that this gun looks is now beginning to determine my playstyle. And then in the weapon design itself, it is reflected in how it actually works. Because they've designed it a specific way. They made a specific look for it. You now have the expectation that, oh, I'm a cowboy. I'm rootin', tootin', fucking bad guy shooting. This is the only hand cannon in the game, actually, that has a unique animation to it. When you fire it, you actually fan-fire it. You will hold down the trigger and you will just throw the hammer back, and it's fully automatic.
Be a cowboy, baby.
You look at it for the first time, and it doesn't matter if you know what it does. You look at it and say, "I'm going to play like a cowboy when I have that." It's a fucking cowboy gun. I want to be a cowboy.
I want to be a cowboy. Yeah, what is it? There's the one gun from Apex Legends that's super weird because you can get mag extensions. And it looks like a revolver, but then it has a larger than 6 bullet clip, and it gets bigger, and you're like, what? How do you extend the clip on this? It has a revolving mag. How do you get an extended clip for this? And it's just kind of a suspension of disbelief where they're like, fuck it.
I think, funnily enough, in BioShock, you know how you could put the extended mag on the revolver in that game if you played it?
Yeah.
And it looks like a horrible, grotesque fucking piece of shit. That actually made the gun feel worse to me. Because it did not look as good, and that was important. Because it wasn't like a cowboy revolver. It was like, to me, it was like this sort of 50s policeman pistol, where it was like, this is a self-defense weapon. And then when you put the extended mag on it, it immediately felt worse. It felt like It felt like you. I think there's an episode of the Angry Video Game Nerd where he talks about all of the attachments for the Sega. Where he describes like putting the Sega CD and the Sega 32X is like putting your Genesis on life support. And that I kept thinking about it every time I would switch to the revolver again after I put the fucking extra mag on it, because I'm like, this looks terrible. It feels terrible now. It does the exact same amount of damage. Nothing else has changed. It just looks stupid.
Yeah,
And that fucked with my expectation of what that gun was supposed to do.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like guns where or weapons inside of a game where you essentially get different versions of the gun. Like you only have one gun for the whole game, but you can change it. So like one of the things that comes to mind for me is I love Honorable Stranger's Wrath.
Yeah.
In that whole game, you have the wrist-mounted crossbow, which is more like a arm catapult that just launches live ammunition. And the ammunition you use changes it. Where, like, it always feels the same. It always has, like, the fire rate isn't always the same, but generally it's not going to change up that much. It's just whatever ammo you're using and for the situation. It's the tools that change. Do you feel like it messes with you visually if you're using the same gun the whole game and you feel like when it does different things it confuses you?
If the same kind of gun does different things and there's no visual indicator, that is where it begins to be a problem. But if the visual begins to change, I think that's what, like, because overall in a game, especially if it's first person, I know, what is it, Stranger's Wrath is the first person shooter, right?
First person / third person. You switch between, but when you are shooting, you're in the first person.
Yeah. Because you only have your first person view as your sort of method of communicating all the information, is that if you have one particular gun, at a certain point, to me, you get used to how that works. Similar to if you have a button anywhere on your phone, let's say the lock button, you get used to it doing that. For me, when I got a new phone, it fucked me up when I found out that the lock button is also the same button that you use to take screenshots. You just hold it down.
Yeah.
It was weird. Because to me, that always meant you are turning off the phone.
Yeah.
So for me, getting a weapon, if it suddenly does something different and there's no visual indicator whatsoever that its state has changed, that would make it difficult for me. Thinking about it in Half-Life 2, do you remember when have you played Half-Life 2, either of you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. You get the gravity gun about half, like maybe like a third of the way through the campaign, maybe about half.
Yeah.
And towards the end of the game, you get the super gravity gun. They have probably the simplest way to indicate that the gun's state has changed, even if you did not have like the little scenario where it goes into the machine and then gets super powered. Is that all they did was they made the like front tongs on the front of it open, and they made it blue, and that immediately said, okay, this thing now probably does something different to me. And I immediately was like, what if I tried it on something else? Then you were able to pull things off the walls and stuff like that. Similarly, a lot of it's such a fucking weird thing to bring up Payday of all things, but there was a lot of weapons you were able to put certain mods onto their guns, and they would actually have a visual indicator, like on the flamethrower. You could change the type of fuel that was in it. Either it did more damage or you had more of it but did less damage. And that would change how you played with it because you had to compensate for that. But what they did was pretty simple too. All they did was they changed what the color of the canister was. If it was red, it did a lot of damage, but you had less fuel for it. Really good for taking down... it was really, really good for taking down enemies that you had to get rid of in a quick second. And then you had the much less damage green canister, and then there was the yellow one in the middle that was sort of the best of both worlds. Or not really, it was sort of middle of the road. I don't know why it would be best of both worlds, but whatever. But it was a very simple visual indicator that meant that this thing now does something different.
The strongest indicator for me that I've seen in a game, probably, that I'm switching the mode of a weapon, I think Bloodborne has one of them, where you just, like, get this intense, like, wrenching slam to, like, change the format of the weapon you're using, where it's either, you know, with the flagship weapon of the series, which is, like, the big fucking buzzsaw blade, he, like, slams it to be longer, and that changes the mode, and you can tell from the moment that you do that for the first time that your weapon is going to change in how it functions. There's no loss of concept on what's happening there. Where, I guess, one game that I was playing through a bit recently that I wasn't sure how I felt about the weapon changing and the weapon mods is, like, the new Doom game.
Yes.
A lot of the time I would, you know, put weapon mods on and stuff and see how they would work, but the standard fire of the gun was just generally what I would end up using, especially on the shotgun. And it was always so weird, too, because you can, like, switch the shotgun to be a grenade launcher.
Yes.
And
it would have like the little like rocket thing, right?
Yeah, and that's so weird to me. Like, that's such a weird disconnect. Where I'm like, oh, now my shotgun's a grenade launcher, and I'm like, how did I get here?
This is not my beautiful gun.
This is not my beautiful gun,
that baby boy.
So it was just, that's really weird to me. Like, putting a mod on a shotgun and making a grenade launcher. There's such a disconnect where a lot of the time I would forget which gun had which mod, what firing type would change for the guns. And then, of course, also, since you never reload in that game, I was like, gotta press R to reload, and I'm like, oh no, that puts the mod on my gun.
I think the shotgun might be the worst version of that in that game. I think that might be the one gun that I feel is, like, the guilty of it, because I feel like a lot of the other times, because you have, like, the assault rifle where you put on the uranium rounds, and you have the scope on it, and that immediately is an indicator that this now does something different.
Yeah, well, it's not that I didn't know it did something different. It's just I didn't know what it did because it didn't it was just weird. Cause...
I think it's worth mentioning that I think the shotgun is the one, like the normal shotgun is the one weapon that sort of fails to have any sort of visual language of that it is now doing. It like you've now installed fucking shot OS 2, and now you can now fucking take night photos on it with it or something like that. But you have things like the assault rifle where you have the little rocket salvo on the side, which, by the way, I'm not quite sure what that I sometimes understood the benefit, but most of the time I was like, this is, I guess, cool. I mean, I love Doom, but like those micro missiles were kind of like whack.
Undoubtedly, Doom 2016 is a great game. It's just weird. It's weird sometimes.
It's just weird, yeah.
Yeah.
But like the visual design is sort of the medium that I work in, so like I am constantly thinking about it whenever I use anything, especially even just amongst different weapons, because I mean, primarily, like I mentioned, I play a lot of Destiny. There's a fuck ton of different assault rifles in this game, and they are made by different, like the in-universe are made by different companies and stuff. So they all have and Borderlands 2 at least has this. Borderlands 1 doesn't, but that game is old. It's fine. It can have its problems. But like, there's very distinct visual design that gives you cues of how they work or sort of what you are going to get out of them. There's a brand called Heika, which is like a real, like, looks like real weapons. Their auto rifles look like a skull. And so you expect them to be really slow, and you expect them to sort of, in a way, kind of mimic how a gun works in real life, which is big damage bullet, do lot damage, big hurt. And they do. They do that exact specific thing I said. But yeah, like the sort of changing of weapon function, I think is a weird line because it needs to be presented in some sort of meaningful visual way. Destiny has a lot of weapons that change their function based on doing something. I think that and Doom are the most recent games that I've played that have that, actually. For example, holding down reload will do something different. There's an auto rifle called Cerberus +1, which is basically a full auto shotgun. It's easier to, it's either a full auto shotgun or a assault rifle that has 4 barrels strapped to it that all fire at the same time every time you pull the trigger.
Okay.
So it has an alternate fire mode on it that has a unique animation, and it has a little light on the side. But there's like a little box strapped to it because the description of it is that, which, by the way, incredible visual design on the thing, because you can literally see all 4 barrels on it, and you're like, oh, this thing is put together from literally just 4 different guns that somebody found. And it's got like wires and shit all sticking outside of it, and then you go to use it, it has insane bullet spread. It's like good only if you're at point blank, because the bullets are flying all over the place. But you're like, this thing looks like it's basically meant to be a sledgehammer, but in gun form. Mm-hmm. And you use it, and you're like, whoa, okay, if anything is within 3 feet of me, it explodes. But it has a little light on the side that you can actually, if you hold down the reload button, and I think this animation adds a lot to it, because what you do is, if you hold down the reload button, your character in first person will just take their fist and fucking slam the side of it really hard, and the lights on the side will change color. And when I first got it, to do this, I was like, I don't know what this does, but it looks like it's broken because now the lights are all different, and like I just hit this thing that was, it's quite literally held together with like zip ties and those metal brackets.
Yeah.
So if I dropped this would break. So I am a superhero and I just punched it. So this thing's probably fucked up. And it actually changes the bullet spread. It changes its rate of fire, and it changes the sound it makes. And so for me, giving the visual indicator that I just hit my fucking gun, and something visually changed on it, even if it was just lights on it, immediately made me aware that, yes, something is different. This gun now, and I mean animations in general, I think add a lot to a weapon. For example, like, even just the size of a bullet in the gun. Like in an LMG, think of something like a minigun versus like a saw, like the M249 and something like Call of Duty. Like the bullets on a minigun are gigantic.
Yes.
And you expect it to tear through something.
Yeah, I was playing through Deep Rock Galactic.
Yes.
And in Deep Rock Galactic, they have I like it when games have that fun little feature where it's like, oh, I'm just going to look at my weapon for a second. And they have a little animation where you can look at your gun. Well, Deep Rock, if you can't reload your gun because you already reloaded it, it's like fully loaded, your character will do a small little animation. So like the driller, if his drills are out, he'll start like grinding his drills together for a second. Well, the guy with the heavy gun, he'll just take out a big fucking huge bullet. Then I guess that's the bullet he puts in his gun, and he'll start like balancing it on his hand and like messing around with the bullet. But the first time I saw that bullet, I'm like, holy shit! I'm like that it's like the size of my pointer finger in a bullet.
Yep.
Like, Jesus Christ, that shit would hurt.
Like you can see the comparison of things like that if you look at like sniper rifles in a video game, specifically Call of Duty. If you think about like how big the magazines that go inside of them are. Like a Dragunov versus a 50 cal, and it's like in your mind, it's like anyone who kind of knows a little bit about guns knows that like the 50 cal sniper rifle is going to be like if you shoot somebody with this in real life, they're going to turn into literal paste.
Yeah.
But like you can see the size of the magazine of these two snipers, and they both fulfill a very similar role, and they're probably going to both in Call of Duty. If you shoot somebody with it, they're both going to die no matter what.
Yeah.
But you in your mind are like. The magazine for the 50 cal is like the size of my entire fucking like hand, and it is like it's like the length of like most of my forearm. And so when you get the reload animation of them putting it in there, and there's a weight to it, animation I think ties a lot in with visual design, but like sort of just on the basis of the gun, size differentiation between different types of ammo, even if the same art and the same type of weapon, is so insanely important. Because it indicates an idea of what its power is.
Yeah.
But like animations like that, adding weight to the size so that you know that there is an importance in exactly how big it is.
Yeah.
Adds so much.
Well, and sound design too is a big part of that as well. Because one of the new guns inside of the new Gears of War game is they added an LMG to it. So you have the gun where like it has a giant. It's like a wheel magazine. Because it's on the top of the gun, and it's like it's wound around it. It's like a spindle. And when you reload it, it takes longer than any gun in the game to reload. And it's like, you like pull it off, and then you like slam a new one on top of it like really hard. So, and I remember the first time I used it, I was like, holy shit. It takes so long to run out of ammo in a clip with this gun. And it's so weird because I'm so used to reloading after shooting for like 2-3 seconds. And with this gun, it's like, well, if I do that, it takes like 5 seconds to actually reload the gun, so it's not worth doing. And so it's got this big weight to it and this like smashiness. And then in the sound design, you can hear the punching of every single bullet as it shoots, and you can feel the stopping power. If you get shot by that gun while running away from somebody, you're going to slow the fuck down.
Yeah, because there's so much of like, because I think internally there is a notion of like power being tied to, I guess I guess I would just call it the bigness factor.
Yeah,
thickness,
like something, the size of the gun, the size of its bullets, and the loudness of it. I think are all what inherently make you when you pick it up or you see someone else using it, like if it's in a multiplayer game, you have an immediate like. Okay, sort of you run through it and do this mental diagnostic of what is the power on this thing, which is not applicable if you're playing Halo 1 because the Magnum is the strongest weapon in the game, but whatever.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, it's a pistol. I know what pistols do in games. They don't do anything. Oh no, I got sniped.
Well, there's stuff like you're always gonna assume like the big heavy minigun's gonna have a ton of stopping power, but I mean unanimously in most games the rocket launcher's pretty big. If you have something that's like a big heavy, like the gravity hammer is pretty huge inside of Halo as well for a melee weapon, and then you have something like grenade launchers tend to that's a weird one for me because grenade launchers vary in size very heavily between a lot of different games. That's one of those guns where, like, the size of it varies pretty hugely, and a lot of the time I'm not really entirely sure the power of it because of the size is very, very inconsistent.
That's one of the things that I think Destiny is weird about. It, sometimes for good, sometimes it kind of makes your expectation of the weapons a little different. Is because there's so many different types of the same weapon. Sometimes they do really good. There is, like, a normal shotgun, which... the shotgun I'm about to put into the chat is literally like the most baseline expectation of what a shotgun does. Like it's like this is just a shotgun. Like it's there's literally no frills on it. When you look at it, you're like, boomstick. I know what that does.
I cock the gun and then I shoot the bullet.
And then like it's a completely normal gun. It does exactly what you expect. But they do have some sort of unique versions of it, some exotics, something like this, which is called the Legend of Acreus, which, going back to the animations, when you pull it out, the animation, I think, is the slowest of any weapon in the game. Like, it's the kind of thing where you see their arms scoop down off the screen and, like, fucking lug it back up. Like, this thing is, like, the BFG, basically.
Yeah.
It's a gigantic shotgun. And it also... basically shoots out what is a brick wall in front of it of electricity. But this communicates to in its size and its animation right away that, okay, you know what a shotgun does, but this is Shotgun 2. This is bigger. This is it's going to do what you expect, but it's going to do it a lot harder.
It's going to giblet everything within a 5-foot radius in a 10-foot wide cone in front of you.
Yeah, everything that is in with the next block is dead when you fire this thing. And so, like, things like that are... I mean, it goes back to comparison, is that understanding, like, this type of weapon, the same kind of weapon, but in a sense of scale. And we started with this with grenade launchers, is that Destiny has two types of grenade launchers. They have drum-loaded, and then they have breech-loaded. Yeah. So think of, like... I actually can't think of many games that have the drum-loaded grenade launcher, actually. Because Halo Reach had the breech-loaded one, where you put one in there.
Yeah, it's more like a canister thing, where you just kind of put it directly into the barrel. I know what you're talking about, drum-loaded. Like, XCOM has a drum grenade launcher, if you look at that one. You don't, I understand what you mean. Junkrat.
Yeah. Or the demo man.
Yeah, because Junkrat, like, that whole thing about him is that, like, he's very... Overwatch is very expressive with its reload animations. Every character has a very, like, personality-based reload animation, and Junkrat's is where he, like, slaps the grenade launcher's drum out of there, and then he just slams a new one in because he doesn't care about his gun. He doesn't. He just wants to get to more exploding.
But that's something that, like, comparison of the sort of, like... There is an idea when you have the drum-loaded one... and ignoring what even the weapon slots that they go into, is that when you have a drum full of grenades, your first instinct with that is, I'm just going to start firing this. Just wildly. And then when you have a breech-loaded one, like something like in Halo Reach, your expectation is, I got to think a little bit with this one.
Yeah, that's also a bit different because the grenade launcher in Halo Reach functions as a detonatable.
Yeah, so do the ones in Destiny, actually. The breech-loaded ones are hold down until they explode.
That's the funny thing is, when I used to play a bunch of Junkrat in Overwatch, and when people would ask me, like, so certain things about Junkrat, one of the big things that I would point out is I would always be like, look, when you're playing Junkrat, just always be firing. Yep. Stop shooting. Just lob them in the general direction. Sometimes you just get kills. Like, there is a certain level of, like, okay, when you see an enemy, obviously you need to aim at them. Like, you're not going to be shooting grenades randomly wherever you're looking. But a lot of the time it was just, you have infinite ammo. and you can hit people by lobbing these grenades over walls and stuff, just do it. There's no reason not to. So I understand what you mean by that. And so visually, a big indicator, I guess, is like BioShock is great at this, where you have the different visual indicators of like what your next ability or weapon is going to do. So like BioShock, you got like your arm morphs and you have like the bug hive, and you kind of have an idea of like, all right, this is a swarm of bugs. I know what this is going to do to somebody, or something like in Metroid when Samus is about to use the ice cannon. You see like the freeze over on the edge of it. So that's like an indicator of like, oh, I know what type of weapon this is going to be. You see a change or you pick up a weapon and you know exactly what it's going to do visually. Oftentimes that's like a big thing with more strange and like obscure weapons like a flamethrower. You're always going to have a visual indicator when you pick it up, like, all right, there's a little lighter at the end of it, I know what this is. And the cryo cannon in Gears of War, when you pick it up, the end of it is frozen and like you can see the kind of like the cryo smoke, the vapor coming off of it. And the visual indicators are a big deal for weapons, especially more obscure ones that aren't super common. Because when you have a shotgun, you look at it, you're like, okay, barrel, maybe 2 barrels, pump action, okay, shotgun. You look at a revolver, you know exactly what that is. A pistol is a pistol most of the time. Sometimes machine pistols exist. Those are kind of weird, and you don't always know. I guess that was kind of one of the issues I had coming into Apex Legends. When I first came to that game, I would pick up a gun, I'm like, is this burst? Is it fully automatic? Is it burst? Like, what does it do? And I'm like, I don't want to shoot it, because then I make noise and people know where I am. And so, like, I would get mad at my friend for shooting his gun when he first started playing to see what it did, because I'm like, you're telling everybody where we are. He's like, I want to know what the guns do. I don't know what any of them do.
No, absolutely not. I think, I don't know. Like, what the smaller a gun gets, I feel like the harder it is for me to immediately pick it up and understand the difference between it. But I think
cricket.
Yeah, like that kind of thing. I think like there is something to be said though about a lot of Valve's weapons, how good of a job they've done with those. Even like the non-weapons, I would call them, I guess, first-person tools. Like the portal gun and the gravity gun.
Yeah.
They're really indicative of what they are doing whenever they are doing it. Like, whenever you can pick something up with the gravity gun, the little prongs open up, and it glows a little brighter. And then when you're holding it, it has like a little lightning to indicate that, yeah, you're good, you got this, you're fine. And the portal gun obviously changes colors based on what portal you fired, or if there are any portals out. If you have no portals out, it goes blank. But the portal gun also has like a weird sort of... I think the portal gun is a really excellent design. It's always funny how much I actually think about Portal in terms of how tight its design is.
Portal is a very well designed game. It's like visually distinct. The voice acting in it's fantastic. The actual mechanics of the game are very fun to play around with and use. So I definitely know what you mean. And
because I was thinking about the portal gun and how like it kind of revels in knowing that it's fun to use.
Yeah.
And it everything about its design is completely indicative of its function, where it changes colors when you fire it. It does not make a particularly aggressive sound when you use it. It makes like a plumping noise almost,
like a whimsical sort of sound.
Yeah, and it also has like a whimsical animation too. Like when you fire a portal, it's sort of like squishes. It has like this like tiny little squishing animation, or that might even just be like the model moving backwards. But like it has this sort of everything about it is designed to be this weirdly like playful looking device with like some parts that are kind of a little like weird, like the weird prongs at the front. But it's kind of what Portal is anyway. It's a game about it being sort of fun and intuitive and a little whimsical, and then there's like some just weirder, like darker elements off to the edges of it. But like the portal gun, I think, is in a way almost like perfectly designed in terms of what its tone is and what it like, especially because that game sort of feeds you what the mechanics are right away, and you understand, okay, gun make portal, I know what this does. So like everything about its design is, I think, excellent in that way, where it feeds back into itself. And it's positive.
What are some of like your guys' like favorite like weird weapon designs that you come across in games? Like some of the guns, or not guns necessarily, any weapon that you found to be the most entertaining to use, the most interesting, or most unique.
One that definitely comes to mind is from a Metroidvania, Axiom Verge. I don't know if any of you have played Axiom Verge.
I have not.
It's a indie Metroidvania, came out a few years ago. It's probably the best like indie Metroidvania gets as far as like getting the feel of like the original Metroids and Super Metroid. And one thing that I think is notable for it, even amongst other like established Metroidvanias, is the huge amount of weapons. Not only is it like a naturally large amount, it's something like 20 to 30 weapons. You can also never get all of them in a playthrough, because each time you generate a game, it generates a random seed that the map stays the same, but it hides secret sections outside of the map, and each one generates three random, like 3 out of a set of 15 weapons. That kind of makes each playthrough different if you go to look for them. And I believe this weapon was one of them, but I also might be misremembering and it's not. It's a variant on your traditional beam shot, which is, you know, like a Metroid or Mega Man style shot. Just a straightforward like projectile in front of you. But something cool about it is every time you shoot it, it applies a random vector of an angle that it moves at, and it's going to be different every time. So it just, as you fire it, it just is like a mess of bullets firing in all these weird arcs that are not... It's kind of like unnatural, because when you think in a normal Metroidvania, you expect to, you know, aim in like the 8 cardinal directions or something like that. But you get all these weird angles that make interacting with enemies really fun. And it's always one that comes to mind. And another one from another Metroidvania, Cave Story, which has a lot of pretty traditional Metroidvania style weapons of like, most of them are guns. But my favorite weapon is the Blade, which is just a character sword that you pick up. And that game has like a weapon level system where you can collect experience from a weapon. It levels up, does more damage. The level 1 blade is a thrown weapon with a very short range for like a Metroidvania game. The level 2 blade is the same thing but bigger, does more damage. And then the level 3 completely changes how the weapon plays, where the spirit of the blade's owner flies out from the blade, from your character really. And if it connects with an enemy, it won't do anything if it misses the enemy. It's just a very short, I think equal to the range of the blade throw. But if it hits, it does this weird sort of AoE in like a pretty tall box in front of you that hits every enemy in it. And it's just a very unique thing for the game, because most of the stuff in it is bullet fires, or like, you know, bullet shots. But it's weird to have this sort of AoE attack that hits more than just in front of you like a weapon would. So those were examples that definitely came to mind for me.
Yeah, the Spirit Blade made me think of like my favorite character to play as inside of the Mortal Kombat series is Takeda, who has the like lash whips.
Yeah,
and I've had a ton of fun using those as a weapon. Obviously, in a fighting game, it's like more of like his moves and less of like, oh, I picked up a new weapon and like that kind of thing. But I have a lot of fun with like, because it's very he's a character that's very punishing for whiffs in a sense. But, like, he can hit people from a very long range, so he has a lot of startup to it. But it's really cool to use these, like, long lash whips and to see, like, his movements and everything. And I've always thought that was a lot of fun for him to use, and I thought that was really cool. And I do like, I like stuff that, like, weapons that keep you fluently in combat.
Yeah.
So, like, one of my favorite parts of playing the Lord of the Rings Shadow of War, Shadow of Mordor series was just playing as Talion and getting this thing where you just look at somebody with your bow and then teleport up to them and like slash them and then continue fighting people and kind of like teleport around and then like bash people and flip over them. And like the sword play in that game, as repetitive as it could get after a while, was a lot of fun when you initially start playing, and like you get the good, like a good feel of using the weapons that you're given in that game. But I also really like it when games try to reward you with like a weapon that's a new experience.
Yeah.
It's not just better, it's like it's unique the way that you use it and what it does. And I think that's a lot of fun, and that's pretty cool. I like saw blade cannons. I think those are fun guns. Like
oh god, yeah. That's one of my favorite parts of Borderlands 2 is the truck that has the saw blade launcher on the top.
Yeah, and then you can get like in Dead Space has a pretty good variety of like interesting weapons you can use to like dismember the enemies.
Dead Space 3, while not necessarily the best game, that weapon crafting thing was incredibly fun. And I think that might have been some of the best weapons I'd ever used in a game because I made them and they were all fucking weird.
I think the game itself was bogged down by the microtransactions and the move from being a horror game to be more like it was the Resident Evil 5 switch. It was less horror, although Dead Space 3 I think was even more less horror, but with more of a focus on action co-op, which not everybody wanted that. Not everybody wanted the series to go in that direction. So it gets a bad rap, but a lot of people I know who actually played it really liked it. But again, like the microtransaction thing, then nobody liked that. So, well, what about you, Gabe? What are some of your absolute favorite guns that you've guns? Sorry, I shouldn't specify it to guns. Weapons.
I think I know Dead Rising has a lot of weapons that I find particularly like excellent. Even some of like the really like just stupid ones. It's like stupid simple ones. I mean, in Dead Rising 2 and in 3, you can take a propane tank and nails, and you can stick nails to the propane tank, and it becomes a sticky bomb that you can just jam into people, into a zombie, and then shoot from a long distance. And that's not necessarily like a weapon on its own. It needs to be combined with something. But I found that always just funny and unique to play around with, especially because you throw it into a crowd and it would just get stuck to a random zombie. I think a lot of zombie games actually typically had particularly interesting weapons.
Because you don't have to worry about weapons functionally really like being better than other ones, because at the end of the day, zombies are just something you mow down. So having unique, interesting ways to kill them is a big way to extend like the gameplay. Where it's like, oh, I can nail zombies to a wall, I can chop off their limbs, and like you could do all this ridiculous, like silly stuff.
Because I think like Dead Rising is basically like it's almost cheating because it's full of so many like weird and unique weapons. And I think outside of that, I think honestly, I like a lot of support weapons in games. So like in Left 4 Dead, which I know is another zombie game, I always found the boomer bile really cool to use. There was something about sort of creating the weapon that would aggro every zombie and immediately make them go absolutely fucking apeshit. And it was a non-lethal weapon other than you summon zombies. I think similarly, I was thinking about it like a minute ago. Another weapon I find unique is in Downwell. It's also the main mechanic, the gun boots.
Yeah.
Which are simultaneously your only method of attack, which is shooting downward, and also the way that you jump. So every time you jump, you shoot bullets down, and as you are falling, the only way you can shoot is down. And it slows you down a little bit every time you fire a bullet, and because it's its core gameplay loop. I always found it super fun to play around with. It was unique, and like even though it's just a gun, it also being your jump was always something that I thought was super cool and super novel.
Yeah, it's interesting when like movement mechanics are meshed in with weapons, like when your way of moving is also a way of fighting. I know one thing I was interested in, and this is probably what interested me the most when it came to when they revealed the Overwatch 2 trailer, was the one character that I noticed was shooting. I think the character's name was Echo. They were shooting like a gelatinous like plasma.
Yeah.
And then it was detonating after a duration. And that's interesting. I'm very interested to see how they implement that in as a weapon. Because that's a big thing for Overwatch, is essentially they want their characters to be defined by how unique their weapons are from each other. So as they get more and more characters in the game, they have to reach out further and further to find new weapons that they can use, because like you're going to run into issues where like Mei, for example, has the cryo weapon, but you can't really add a pyro character because that's kind of what Mei does already. The difference is instead of doing damage, Mei slows you and freezes you. So, like, a lot of the things will cross over into each other, and you have to be careful not to just make the same weapon. Like, they wanted to give Baptiste a gun, but it's like a burst fire weapon, and then you have Sombra, which is an SMG, but then you have Tracer that is 2 SMGs, so it's like, okay, how do their guns differentiate from each other? And those are probably two of the closest ones I would say, other than like maybe Orisa and Soldier or something, because they're both just rapid fire guns, but they feel different enough where I haven't felt like they've bled over too much. And then the rest of the characters have their all their kits, and the MOBA aspect of them having like all of these cooldowns and abilities that try to make them more unique and try to differentiate them more. So I'm always interested to see what they do going forward to try and implement new ways to have characters fight with each other, because that's like the biggest drawing point to a new character is how uniquely they function. For instance, when they added Sigma's got like the weird orbs that he just like shoots and they'll bounce, but they explode at a distance always. And they're kind of wacky and weird, but unique enough where it's like, okay, this is pretty good. So
it's pretty good.
wow, that's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Another game that I think has really good weapon variety for both aesthetic reasons and mechanically is I think Splatoon does a good job of making different weapons, and it kind of gets to cheat on it a little because a lot of what makes weapons different on top of just the numbers is the way they do the game. Each weapon is tied its own sub-weapon and a special weapon, which I feel is a system that I'm almost positive is not unique to Splatoon, but it's definitely the example I can think of when it comes to like weapon sets being what's important. And I really like the variety of play and how a lot of these, even just the weapons themselves, not necessarily the whole sets, interact with each other and do sort of like the same archetype of thing. Because Splatoon's all about objectives mainly, and not about the taking out other characters. So what's most important is how much like turf you cover in at least the base game mode. And weapons that are good at that are often not good at taking out other player characters, and the ones that are good at taking out other player characters aren't good at spreading turf, which I think is a very interesting way to combine mechanics like we mentioned before. And it's really cool just how many weapons they have and how differently they all play from each other, even within the same archetype. Like, of all the sniper weapons, they have a bunch of different ones that can hold their charge while you're in squid form for a bit, which make it sort of play a lot differently because you're allowed to with these weapons rather than a traditional sniper weapon where you just sort of post up somewhere and try to get pot shots on the enemy teams and get kills. You kind of have a bit more freedom to maneuver around because you don't just, if you move, you don't lose all your offensive power. You have the potential to retain that for a bit. And then the other weapons trade-off is maybe they shoot faster, but they can't snipe a one-shot. But they're potentially faster for maybe covering up turf in close quarters combat, which I think Splatoon's a really well done weapon system as far as how the aesthetics all play out and making a mechanically diverse system with a lot of moving parts that allow for a lot of player expression and what you pick and how you play them.
Yeah, and there's always like the implementation of, I guess, interesting weapons like earlier I talked about Zelda, and that goes over into Smash Bros, where when you're playing Smash Bros, like Link's different things that he gets through his journey are used as weapons, like the boomerang and the bombs and everything, and those all function differently and pretty uniquely, and they're pretty fun to use. I also really like I guess when I was playing Doom earlier, I loved the moment when I was like, oh, it's punch time. I have to just run up to everything and just beat the shit out of it and punch it. And for some reason, there's something just cathartic about just turning into Ultimate Punch Man and just running up and beating the shit out of everything that's near you. That's why.
Yeah, I will say, if you are having trouble, when you're designing a game and you're having trouble figuring out what weapon to put in it, sometimes just do fists.
Yeah.
I think like only like Grand Theft Auto is the only game I can think of where using your bare hands like doesn't feel great. But that's literally because in Grand Theft Auto that's a last ditch effort. Like that is you trying to very, 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 very panicked try to survive whatever thing you've gotten yourself into.
Yeah, I like inside of For Honor, my favorite character to play was the Centurion, because half the time the Centurion just punches you in the face. Like he has the Gladius, but then it's just like just like quick jabs with the punch, and that's always really cool to me. I like the brawler character, and I like being able to do stuff like that, and that's why I like melee weapons and stuff. I remember playing Fallout and just doing a no weapons run where I just punch people, and the fun of just going into that small VATS cutscene where you like hit a roach and it explodes. You're just kind of like, all right, that's pretty cool. That's pretty exciting.
It's fun. It's just fun. Good fun.
It just
The
works.
whole family. I mean, it did. It did just work.
It did just work. It's just slowly not just working anymore.
It worked when it came out, and they've just been running it back ever since.
Yeah. We just taped it together. Don't worry, guys. It can do it.
I guess me posing the question: do you have like a top tier game that you think that its weapon design is like? I guess what you'd consider to be like the master class, if there's anything in the game that falls short of like being great, it's very, very few, if none, basically.
That's what we're talking about specifically for weapon designs.
Yeah, like if there's any game that you think just basically has, I would go to say nigh unimpeachable weapon design.
That's a hard one to say. I mean, there's a lot of games that just have like weapons that feel good. It's hard for me to like determine a game that I specifically think the weapon design is like absolutely on top, and there's like pretty much no issues I have with it. I mean, because immediately I think of shooters. That's a big thing because those are the ones where like shooters are usually the big games for I have a new weapon. Oh, I have a new weapon. You keep switching them out and you keep finding new ones.
Yeah, because I was gonna say honestly, like in my mind. Almost, well, I mean, of the Ratchet and Clank games which I played, which were the first three, and I didn't play any after that, or Sunset Overdrive, I have always considered that Insomniac has been incredibly good at making unique and good-feeling like tools and gadgets and weapons. Even in Spider-Man, I felt like all of the things that they had designed felt like all unique, and they all had a purpose, and there was a time and a place for all of them. And they all felt good to use. Even though those were less visually designed, they all had a listed function, and when you used them, you understood immediately what they did.
What about you, Ollie? What's a game that you think has like just peak weapon design? I mean, you did mention Splatoon.
Splatoon's definitely up there for me. I would say it's probably either between Splatoon or Monster Hunter, and specifically Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate on the 3DS. And it may also apply to Generations, but I've not played Generations. But I know people talk a lot about how good the weapons are in that game. It would apply to Monster Hunter World, but World has the same highs as those games, but it has some worse lows where there's a lot of weapons that don't reach their potential due to some kind of mechanics with them, or their numbers aren't tuned just right. But I think the best thing about Monster Hunter is every weapon is really equally viable, both as like a single-player experience and a multiplayer experience. And for the most part, they're all, like, unless you're a meta speedrunner and you only care about, like, max DPS, they'll all get you the job done in a hunt so you can really just express yourself and pick what you want to play, use whatever gimmick you want, with really no fear of, not being able to complete content or not being able to have fun.
It's hard for me to come up with one myself personally, because there's a lot of games I can think of that have a variety of weapons, but I don't know if I can say that I think they have, like, peak weapon design where I'm like, there's nearly flawless. I think every gun's great. I mean, like, the Halo series has always had very good guns, and I've always liked pretty much all of them. There's a lot of shooters I felt have done a really, really good job at it. A lot of RPGs also can feel that way at certain points where, like, I feel that there's enough of a difference between using these weapons, but oftentimes that's not necessarily how they feel, but, like, the strategy change that you go about when you use a different weapon. I do think that Overwatch does do a very good job at differentiating its characters with the weapons they use. As well as, TF2 can do that too, but a lot of the TF2 characters have a shotgun. Like, a lot of them have, like, a little bit of overlap. But it can also
there's some stinkers in there, but...
Yeah, well, when you get into the extended shit of, like, all the different guns you could get from and equipped, they have a lot of them that are just bad. Not worth using, but...
The pistol feels bad. The default pistol feels bad.
Oh, yeah, it does definitely not feel very good.
That gun, like, and on the fucking engineer, it's a primary weapon, and that gun sucks.
Well, I think it's about time for us to close out. So we really appreciated having you on, Gabe. Yes. It was a good time. I enjoyed hearing from you, and maybe we'll have you on again at some point as well. And it was also nice having you here as well, Ollie.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, I hope everybody who's listening has a wonderful evening, and thank you for listening.